Nicholas had always believed that true art was shaped by the unspoken stirrings of the heart. As a child, he had discovered his fascination with sculpting when he stumbled upon his grandfather's old chisel in the attic. Since that day, every rough block of stone felt like an unopened letter, brimming with possibilities he could reveal. Over time, his gifts flourished, but he remained shy when it came to what truly fueled his work. His deepest emotions. People praised his artistry, admired his patience, and even sought out his intricate marble figurines. Yet few recognized the silent wellspring of reverence, yearning, and sometimes heartbreak that guided his hands. Nestled in the heart of the city was the Grand Museum of Fine Arts. It was a place for the eye to wander among centuries old paintings and sculptures, for the mind to be stirred by the relics of forgotten eras. It was there that he had found both solace and inspiration. The high ceilings, polished marble floors, and hushed corridors imbued the galleries with a timeless solemnity. Many of the city's artists came and went, leaving behind their catalogs or proposals for exhibitions. But Nicholas was different. He never aimed for acclaim. Content in his reclusive corners, he focused on each swirl and curve of stone in his workshop, refusing to believe he deserved recognition. That was until a particular event became impossible for him to ignore: the museum's annual exhibition of local talents. Mina, the new assistant curator at the museum, was tasked with organizing the event. She was known for her discerning eye and fervent devotion to the arts. That devotion translated into hours spent meticulously cataloging pieces, reaching out to artists, and arranging each display like a puzzle. Her authoritative presence commanded a room, but behind her confident posture lay a softness. Whenever she encountered a piece that spoke to her, her usually collected composure melted away, replaced by an unguarded admiration. It was a quality that, in a world of posturing and pretense, made her stand out. Though Nicholas had never spoken to Mina directly, he had noticed her. On Saturday afternoons, dressed in sharp suits and soft scarves, she glided through the corridors, taking quick notes on a clipboard, discussing possible acquisitions with her colleagues, only to stop in awe before certain paintings or sculptures. Nicholas was mesmerized by this seamless blend of dignity and passion. On those rare occasions she glanced his way, his heart kicked against his rib cage, nearly knocking the breath out of him. A fleeting conversation in the marble wing had sparked his impulse. Or was it an obsession? They had crossed paths while he was examining some classical busts of Roman emperors. Mina had introduced herself, her voice delicately firm. Her question was straightforward, perhaps about a sculpture's provenance. Yet Nicholas only recalled the gentle lilt of her tone and the kindness in her eyes. After that moment, he carried her voice with him wherever he went, shaping the memory into something intangible yet resonant. And one quiet afternoon, alone in his workshop, he found himself chiseling her features into stone without even consciously deciding to do so. At first, it was just a face. He worked on the gentle sweep of the brow, the graceful hint of a smile, the subtle lines of concentration around her eyes when she observed a piece of art. Before he knew it, he had spent hours sketching her likeness in charcoal, from angles, expressions, half-remembered turns of the head. Each damp plaster cast and carefully chipped marble fragment revealed another aspect of Mina. In his mind, these fragments formed not a single image, but a chronology of her presence: the curious tilt of her chin, the empathy in her gaze, and the quiet authority that braced her shoulders. The statue evolved slowly in the intimacy of lantern-lit late nights. Sometimes Nicholas pondered how irrational it was, devoting an entire sculpture to a woman who barely knew him. He berated himself for the brazen presumption, fearing that if she ever found out, she might misunderstand. But no matter how adamantly he scolded himself, each time he put the chisel to stone, all doubts vanished. He was forging magic from marble, turning his wordless devotion into something tangible. The act felt like an offering, a prayer to the muses of art and to the gods of unspoken love. His daily life revolved around fairly mundane rituals, opening his workshop door, selecting the right tools, and grinding away. Occasionally, he would step into the museum to gather glimpses of new exhibitions, or rather, to catch sight of Mina. To blend in, he would comment politely about the artwork, or ask the museum attendant some small question about techniques, and his subdued nature offered him a certain level of anonymity. Meanwhile, Mina dashed busily across the museum halls, making notes, consulting with staff, or conferring with the head curator in hushed tones. Nicholas was content just to watch her from the distance, gleaning bits of her energy whenever she passed by. Outside the museum, the same city that bustled with commerce and traffic also housed cozy cafes, bookstores, and small galleries dotting hidden corners. Occasionally, Nicholas would retreat to one of these cafes to gather his thoughts or sketch in silence. He was there one rainy evening, finishing a quick pencil drawing of a Roman column, when, to his surprise, Mina walked in, her coat soaked with raindrops. She wore a look of mild frustration at first, presumably due to the weather, but almost immediately her face brightened when she saw the smell of coffee and warm lighting, and before he could decide whether to hide or greet her, she noticed him. "Hi," she said softly, shaking residual water from her umbrella. "Nicholas, right?" He half rose from his chair, uncertain if he should stand or remain seated. "Yet yes," he managed. "It's pouring outside. May I join you?" She gestured toward the empty chair at his table. Over a single latte shared between them, they had their first real conversation. It began with polite inquiries about the weather, moved on to a brief exchange about an upcoming museum renovation, and flowed into a gentle unraveling of personal histories. Nicholas learned that Mina had studied art history in Florence, developing a keen interest in sculptures and architecture, which explained her unwavering passion. She was an only child, raised by parents who had traveled the country and enrolled her in art classes whenever possible. Her father, a historian, had sparked her fascination with the stories behind each piece of art, teaching her that artistry and narrative were inseparable. After that shared coffee, Nicholas felt both elated and uneasy. Elated because he realized Mina was even more genuine than he imagined, her words laced with sincerity and a subtle humor that put him at ease. Uneasy because of the hidden statue she unknowingly inspired, a confession of adoration that had taken shape in his workshop. Would she see it as flattering or heartbreaking? Would it seem too intimate for two near strangers? These dilemmas weighed heavily as he proceeded with his daily routine. Weeks rolled by, and the hustle of the museum's upcoming event picked up steam. Mina and Nicholas stumbled upon each other more often, first in the mosaic hallway where she was examining potential lighting for an installation, then in the sculpture garden outside, where he was admiring the interplay of sunlight, and each fleeting moment brought them closer. He tried, in his awkward, hesitant ways, to show small kindnesses, offering to help her carry a stack of catalogs or quietly picking up a dropped pen. She, attentive and appreciative of detail, never forgot to thank him. As the opening date for the exhibition drew near, posters went up, announcements were made, and local artists clamored for space to display their works. Nicholas, too, was invited to submit a piece, but he resisted. He had never been comfortable with public exposure. To him, sculpting was a sacred, personal journey. It was only after Mina carefully pressed him several times, her tone equal parts encouragement and gentle insistence, that he grudgingly gave in. He admitted he had been working on something, but he was vague about its subject. The conversation lingered in the air, a silent promise that he would bring a piece to the museum once it was complete. Mina smiled appreciatively, her eyes shining like he had done her a kindness. Each night, alone in the workshop, he continued shaping the marble block. From a coarse, unadorned mass emerged the lines of her forehead, the arch of her eyebrows, the softness of her lips, and a delicate tilt of the head that captured her attentiveness and grace. He found it mesmerizing to chase her likeness in stone, yet each hammer strike also pounded with the fear of merging his private feelings into something so blatantly visible. Still, He couldn't stop. This sculpture had become his truth, a reflection of the longing in his chest. Then, just a few days before the event, a letter slid underneath his workshop door. The museum was requesting that all participating artists deliver their works within 2 days for final display arrangements. Nicholas felt panic coil in his gut. He invoked every shred of courage to make the finishing touches. The nights bled into dawns. Time refused to slow. On the final morning before the deadline, he painstakingly polished the statue's surface, gently smoothing out the last trace of roughness. As the first pink rays of sun seeped through his workshop's blinds, a ghostly shimmer played across marble Mina's features. He stood there, stunned by what he had created. Somehow it felt incomplete and yet so alive. Did it truly capture her essence, or had it captured his own longing? With the reluctant help of a family friend who owned a small truck, Nicholas loaded the sculpture. He drove it to the museum in the early morning, careful to avoid the main hours of foot traffic. Only a security guard and a couple of staff members were present to guide the piece to its designated space. He whispered instructions about handling, but kept silent about the sculpture's subject. As the white sheet settled over the marble form in the museum corridor, a flicker of apprehension swept across him. He gave the staff instructions not to remove the cloth until the official day, resolute that no one should see it early, especially not Mina. The opening day arrived adorned with the city's mid-morning sunlight. Inside the museum, visitors meandered through arranged installations. There were paintings in soft oils, watercolors of cityscapes, abstract installations capturing environmental themes, and in the far hallway near the main staircase, sculptures of varied sizes, mediums, and motifs. Nicholas found a corner, hoping to vanish into the background. He watched all the artists greeting people, describing their pieces and collecting praise. He felt his usual nervousness mounting, but it was too late to evacuate his creation. The statue belonged to the event now. Mina made her entrance gracefully, a stack of small pamphlets in her hands. She provided tours to both dignitaries and curious onlookers, explaining the narratives behind each piece in gentle, thorough terms. At one point, she spotted Nicholas, offered him a warm smile, and gestured for him to join her as she led a small group along the sculpture route. Quietly, with a hush in his chest, he towered behind them, consumed by the wait for his unveiling. Eventually, they congregated before the white-shrouded form. The label at the base read, Untitled Marble. Artist, Nicholas Wade. Well, Mina said, looking at Nicholas with an encouraging nod, we saved one of our most mysterious pieces for last. Could you share a bit about it? Nicholas stepped forward, nearly stumbling on the polished floor. His heart was pounding so loudly it threatened to drown his voice. I hope it speaks for itself, he began, uncertain how to proceed. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead. It's a portrait, a reflection of someone who embodies the passion and dedication that the museum stands for. Slowly, Mina reached forward and lifted the sheet, revealing the statue to the small crowd. Gasps escaped throats. It was a near-perfect rendition of her likeness, though rendered with a reverent flair. The lips were parted in faint wonder, the eyes exuded a tender curiosity, and the posture carried a subtle elegance. For an electrifying moment, hushed awe overcame the gathering. Then voices rose in soft exclamations, murmurs of admiration, hushed comments about the detail, the technique, the uncanny portrayal of a real person. Mina's eyes widened as she realized who the figure was. A blush tinged her cheeks, and she took a step back, pressing her lips together. One onlooker whispered something like, "It looks just like her," setting off another ripple of astonishment. Nicholas stood rooted to the spot, fighting the urge to run. He had never felt more vulnerable in his life. Here was his beating heart laid bare for strangers' critiques. In the closure of that moment, Mina's gaze flicked from the statue to Nicholas's face, her expression unreadable. She said nothing for a long time, and the crowd sensed the intimacy, eventually drifting away to give them space. Nicholas's throat felt too tight to speak. Finally, with a breath that shook slightly, Mina turned to him. Her eyes glowed with a brightness beyond any curated display. "You made this for me?" she asked. He nodded, guilt and hope warring in his expression. I'm sorry if it's too much." She shook her head gently. "No," she said almost under her breath, an air of wonder in her tone. "No, it's beautiful." They left the corridor, stepping into a side gallery where fewer visitors roamed. Amid tapestries and medieval artifacts, they found a moment to speak privately. Nicholas braced himself for gentle reproach, or at best, a polite thank you. But Mina surprised him by laying a hand on his arm. "You captured so much more than my face," she murmured. "I see my hopes, my excitement for the museum, maybe even a bit of my vulnerability. How did you—" He swallowed, heart pounding. "I watch you," he admitted. "I see how devoted you are to the art, how you cradle every detail so gently. You inspire me." She held his gaze. "That's very kind." After a brief moment of hesitation, she added, "Is that why you never approached me directly before?" Sheepishly, he dropped his gaze to the floor. "I'm not good with words. It's easier to say how I feel through stone." They paused, absorbing each other's presence. It felt as if an unspoken, delicate string tied them together. Yes, it was rushed. Perhaps they went from near strangers to the subject of an intense love in a matter of weeks. But for artists who poured their spirits onto canvas or carved it into stone, perhaps time followed a different pace. The heart recognized authenticity in brushstrokes and chisel marks more swiftly than hours or days could measure. Over the next week, Nicholas's sculpture garnered widespread admiration. Media outlets wrote small features about it, some praised the realism, others commented on the touching homage to someone who had dedicated her life to preserving culture. Mina, on her part, stayed remarkably humble. She guided inquisitive visitors through the exhibit, clarifying, "It's not just me he's honoring, it's the spirit of curation and the act of bringing history to the public." In the evenings, when the museum's doors closed, Nicholas and Mina often found themselves lingering in the halls. They would talk about new ideas for exhibitions, the ways different periods of art influenced modern styles, or whimsical details about the museum's older architecture. Nicholas discovered a new level of comfort, surprising even himself with how easily he could open up when she was near. Sometimes she would come to his workshop, the air filled with the scent of plaster dust and the echo of tools on stone. He showed her his unfinished projects, explained his processes, and even let her try chiseling a small pattern under his gentle guidance. A playful banter took hold as she tried and nearly chipped off more than she intended, laughing at her mistakes while Nicholas coached her carefully. The closeness that blossomed between them was effortless. Outside of art, they also talked about their childhood memories, the songs they grew up listening to, and the hopes they harbored for the future. They made modest plans, like visiting a newly opened sculpture garden in a neighboring town, or traveling to see a specialized exhibit about medieval effigies. Each plan carried both the excitement of an upcoming adventure and the warmth of shared curiosity. One crisp evening, after the museum had locked its doors and the staff had headed home, Mina and Nicholas found themselves strolling through the darkened galleries, passing under dimly lit arches. Light from the city's street lamps filtered in through tall windows, creating an ethereal path across polished floors. They stopped in front of a classical marble piece, a depiction of two Roman lovers parted by war. Nicholas traced the outer edge of the statue's base, lost in thought. Mina, standing next to him, placed a hand softly on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. He turned, eyebrows lifted. "For what?" "For seeing me," she said, her voice catching. "For capturing a part of me I'd never really looked at closely, and for revealing yourself so completely." Nicholas felt a tremor of gratitude mixed with affection swirl within him. Taking a leap of courage, he gently brushed his fingers against her cheek. She closed her eyes momentarily, leaning into his touch. The museum's hushed expanse seemed to hold its breath, as though the art on the walls stood guard over this fragile moment. In that silence, Nicholas recalled all the days he had spent shaping her form from cold marble, unknowingly forging a connection that would ripple into both their lives. He recognized that, in giving this piece of himself, he had gained something immeasurable in return. Mina's acceptance, her empathy, and the playful glimmer of warmth in her eyes reminded him that it wasn't the statue's surface alone that mattered, but the pulse of tender understanding it evoked. Time went on, and as the exhibition concluded, Nicholas's sculpture was moved to a more permanent place of honor within the museum, near the entrance to the newly renovated marble wing. With that renovation came Mina's promotion to a higher curatorial position. She began spearheading new exhibitions and forging partnerships with museums abroad. While Nicholas's quiet confidence grew, he accepted more commissions, displayed other works in smaller galleries, and even dared to open up parts of his workshop to the public for demonstrations. Friendships blossomed, and though he still treasured his moments of solitude, he no longer shielded himself behind a fortress of reticence. One evening, with the day's museum events winding down, Mina found Nicholas in front of her statue. He was standing like a sentinel, observing the gentle interplay of lights that illuminated the marble. She approached him, sliding a hand under his arm. "There's going to be a conference in Paris," she said softly, "a week next month. They'll have an exhibit featuring contemporary sculptors, and I'm heading there to represent the museum. I was thinking maybe you'd like to accompany me." He couldn't hide his surprise. Paris was a dream for many an artist, a city brimming with centuries of heritage. "You want me to show my work there?" "Only if you want to," she answered. "We can go as collaborators or as—" She dropped her gaze, a small smile tugging at her lips. "We can just explore the city together, if that's all you feel ready for." Nicholas squeezed her hand gently. "I'd love that," he said, voice trembling with emotion he no longer tried to conceal. Together they wandered through the museum's corridors, the footsteps echoing softly against the old marble floor. Nicholas found himself ever more fascinated by Mina's stories, her recollections of Italy, her curiosity about new artists, and her steadfast goal of bridging the gap between history and contemporary life. She, in turn, was drawn to his quiet perseverance, the fervor that charged every chip of his chisel, revealing the subtle convictions swirling in his heart. They complemented each other, where Mina's clarity guided public appreciation. Nicholas's introspection delved deeper into emotion. Each recognized that the best artistry lay in merging comprehension with sentiment, knowledge with the intangible ache of longing. Their bond soon expanded from the museum halls to the everyday corners of their lives. Sometimes it was as simple as cooking dinner in Nicholas's cramped kitchen or going for a morning walk in the park, where they would discuss their next creative endeavor. Other times it was more momentous, mingling with visiting dignitaries at after-hours museum receptions or sharing sketches with prospective partners who were drawn to the sincerity of their collaboration. Through each triumph, each small discovery, each worry, they found solace in the intangible harmony they had built between them. Weeks melted into months, and the museum prepared for its next significant unveiling. It was an ambitious exhibit featuring a mix of cutting-edge installations and traditional craftsmanship that showcased how art evolved over centuries. Nicholas contributed a new series of marble pieces. Mina, as head curator, oversaw the entire curation process with unwavering dedication. Late one night, after a day's hectic preparations, they collapsed into a pair of chairs in the museum foyer. The echo of their combined sighs stirred dust motes floating in the warm glow of overhead lights. "You know," Mina began, looking over at him with tired eyes and a playful smile, "sometimes I worry we're both too married to this museum." Nicholas chuckled. "Maybe, but at least I'm not chiseling the building's foundation." Not yet. She laughed, the sound carrying like an intimate secret across the empty foyer. If it ever crumbles, I'll trust you to rebuild it. Of course, he said, and reached for her hand. They were quiet for a moment, allowing their tiredness to catch up with them, comfortable in each other's silences. We should head home, she whispered. I suppose, he agreed, only half inclined to move. Her presence was a home in itself, an anchor he never expected to find. When Nicholas locked up his workshop that night, the same hush enveloped his space, but it carried a different texture than before. The shadows were no longer lonely. They hinted at possibility. His tools, once scattered like secret confessions, felt like companions to his newfound motivation. There was no more fear of how to express himself, because somewhere in a sleeping apartment across town, the curator who had captured his heart understood him beyond words. He didn't need a new statue to prove his devotion. The museum walls were already whispering of their story, yet he knew they would continue to craft something new together, maybe a piece for the Paris show or something even more daring, like a collaborative exhibit that invited visitors to step into the entwined worlds of artistry and curation. But that was for another day. For now, he let the workshop door click shut, inhaled the faint scent of dust, and walked into the cool evening with anticipation alight in his chest. There were no crowds, no reporters, no dramatic unveiling left to do. All that remained were the quiet steps through a sleeping city and the memories of what the two had built. Chiseled emotion turned radiantly real, born of an unspoken longing that at last had found answers in shared glances and tender confessions. In the end, the shy sculptor and the devoted curator discovered that where words hesitated, art spoke. Bridging the gap between timidity and devotion, the museum, once just a place of artful echoes, became a living testament to a connection neither had expected, but both had secretly yearned for.